Hi, my name is Darlington, and this is my story. So, I have a very long story, but I'll make it very short and I'll get straight to the point. I think I'll start from the very beginning of when I became a young adult and I needed to get into the world and start facing real issues that men face, issues that adults face. And at the time, 2005, when I was still 17, I lost my parents, both of them in the same year. And life, of course, took a really deep turn and things just got really ugly so quick. It was one of the most difficult years. And of course, having to become a man. And now you don't have that father figure, or you don't have anybody that mentors you to become a man. You don't have anybody that tells you or give you a little bit of experience of what the world really looks like, what it's like out there. You're used to being under your parents' guidance in the house where they watch over you, look after you, care for you, and you come in just to offload all your problems and tell them the things that are going on, whether in school, with friends, or anywhere else. But that was now suddenly taken away, and you are left with nowhere to look and with no one to ask questions. And the truth of the matter is sometimes you don't even know what are the right questions to ask, who are the right people to go to. And sometimes there's just nobody who sort of avails themselves for you. So fast forward 2009, Johannesburg in the city, and I'm trying to find my feet, still a very young person. And I found myself in a shelter, homeless, with nowhere and no one to turn to, no one to guide you, no one to tell you the things that are important in life. And I started um, trying to find myself in a very strong city, in a very big city that has a lot of things happening. And I just couldn't do it because I didn't have life experience. I didn't know what to do and where to go. But one thing that I can say, at the time, I had just found God, and I was hanging with a thread, and that thread was God. And at the time, I was still under 21. I think I was like 19, now 20, and no job, no home, no friends, nobody around. And in trying to figure out what to do next, I would wake up every morning. Of course, the place we were staying, we were only allowed to sleep there. Then next morning, you must get up, you go out, because cleaners would have to come and clean the space up. So you would have to go out, look for your own food, find something to do. And then in the evening, you're welcome to come and sleep. And there would be thousands, there were thousands of us in that space. A lot of people who were in Joburg around those times would know that there was Methodist in central Joburg that was accommodating people who didn't have anywhere to go. And I was part of those people. And just waking up and not knowing where to go on its own, or not knowing who to turn to on its own, was enough to destroy my life, because I could have turned onto wrong things. I could have gone into crime. I could have turned into drugs. I could have turned into anything that I would have seen as fitting at the time. But God said He would not let me go into those kind of situations. So staying there, I met a guy who was I think, sort of security at the shelter, and he told me that he knew a pastor who lived in the city, and he said he wanted to take me there. He had spoken to him about me, and he asked me to come over to see him. We went there. This is 2009 still, and I met with him. So one thing that's always been on my life is the gift of worship, leading worship, and that's through song mostly and playing instruments. And so he had told the pastor that there's a boy who's living at the shelter that can play instruments and can sing. And for this pastor, he had a need for that in his church. So he called for me and I went, and then he told me, "What can you do?" And I said to him, "It depends on what, the question is about." And he told me, "Do you play music?" I said, "Well, not so great, but yes, I do." And then he says, "Okay, there's the piano. Go and play something for me. Let me hear." And I went and I played what I could, and I sung what I knew to sing. And he said, "Here's the deal. I take you off the shelter. You come and sleep in the church. You don't have to sleep there anymore. You're welcome to also spend your days here whilst you're looking for a job. And that will be your payment. And you serve in the band. You lead the band. You lead the worship. And you do everything that needs to be done around cleaning the premises and taking care of the building." And for me, that was like a blank check. Like, that was all I ever wanted, a place where at least I can wash my clothes, dry them, and wear them again, because I only had what was on my body. So you would go for days without having them washed. You can go for days without taking a shower, because really there's no way you could take a shower. So I came, and then I started staying in the church. We were just sleeping. I was just sleeping on one corner. It was me and two other guys. One guy they said you could play drums. So he came, he was also now staying there. And we started serving in this church, and I was playing music, and I was leading worship, and other guys was playing drums and stuff. And that was the payment for what we were doing. And for me, that was enough, because then I good sleep. I started getting some good sleep at the time, because knowing that I'm safe, because the place that we were was really not a safe place. People will be jumping over sleeping people, and anything can happen at any time. There were instances where there would be maybe like a fire or scares of a fire, and people will run and almost having a stampede. And so now staying there meant that I could wake up in the morning and have some sense of security. Even if I buy an extra shirt, I have somewhere to put it. So then I would go out and I'll go look for work and come back most times with nothing, having found nothing. And I remember that sometimes would go to downtown Johannesburg. There were some Asian food stores there, and they would give us jobs, but the jobs were to offload the containers. So I got there. I remember this very specific time. I got there, and there was a 6 meter or longer container there parked, and the lady would write tickets and give each person tickets, and on the tickets would be an amount that you'd get after offloading. So I looked at my ticket and I saw it was written something between 25 rands and 30 rands. And my countenance just dropped immediately. Like, am I going to offload this humongous truck for 25 bags? And the lady looked at me and she said, "If you're not interested, you're welcome to walk away. There's many other people that are going to come." And I looked at my situation and I looked at the amount I could make. And I said, "I will do it." And we were standing by of opening the doors of the container, and we were getting trucks loaded on our backs. I mean, there's big bags of the beans or grain, whatever that was in there, and we offloaded. And I had my 30 bucks, and that took me through the week for that day. And there were many other opportunities like that I embraced out of desperation, and they were able to sustain me. And whilst we're still staying in these premises, um, I still didn't know anything about life. I still didn't know anything about being a man, growing up, though I looked forward to someday growing up and becoming a husband to someone, a father to someone, and, a responsible man. And at the time, I can't say I was not responsible. I would just say I just didn't have anything. So fast forward a few months into that, there was a guy who came from Zambia. He said he was an ordained pastor. He was coming now to worship with us in the same place where we were staying. And for some reasons, he also came to stay with us for a bit. But for me, that was someone that was God sent just to come and change my situation, change my story. Because when he came, he started teaching me to pray. He was an older brother that I needed at the time. He was the listening ear that I needed at the time. And whenever I came back from looking for a job and things are looking really bad, he would come and say, look, this is not the end of the world. This is not your story. The story that I see that God shows me, the guy or the man that God is showing me that you are, is not this man that you see yourself as today. And he began to teach me to pray, began to teach me to get into the word. He taught me how to pray in tongues. And I began to understand the concept of praying, the concept of waging war, the concept of warfare. And I began to start my day with praying, end my day with praying. Even when I'm walking, looking for work, I'll be praying. And I remember that during that time, I met a guy from Kenya, and he said to me, you're looking for work? I said, I'm looking for work. And he said, I don't have much, but I'm a small business. I make rubber stamps. So if you want, you can go around the city, find people that want to buy. Whenever you make a sale, I'll give you 20%. And I'm talking 2009, this would have been some ridiculous amounts, maybe a rubber stamp for 40 rands, 60 rands. Probably the most expensive rubber stamp would have been maybe 300, which would be those self-inking rubber stamps with dates and all that. And I agreed. I said, I'm not doing anything, so I'll do that. So he gave me some brochures and pamphlets and all that. And I took off. I went into the streets. I went into businesses and I knocked and I asked for managers. Managers came to see me. Filthy looking guy is asking for a manager. And I got there and I told them, this is what I'm doing. I am marketing this business. We make rubber stamps. This is what we do. And I was diligent at it. And a week I would sell 1 or 2 rubber stamps. And that sustained me for months in my journey of looking for work, in my journey of trying to find something to sustain me. And until for some reasons, I don't remember how I got disconnected from this guy. But long story short, I then found a job in construction and I went and I started working and we were also earning something like $40 a day, which was ridiculously low. It was very low, but I didn't have a choice. I had to do it. I think it was 45 rands to be specific, because I remember that fortnight I would have 450 rands. That's after 10 days of work. And then from that time, with the mentor that I now had, the prayer person who was now teaching me to pray and stuff, I started putting my life together with that little. I was able to buy myself a first ever computer. I was able to buy myself my first cell phone. I was able to buy myself a few change of clothes, and I started cleaning myself up from the little that I had. And from there, I could see that my life was now changing and heading in a direction that I never imagined. And I didn't have a lot. I had per month 900 rands, which was supposed to look after me, buy essentials, and also commute whenever I needed to. And if I also fast forward it a little bit, during the time that before I found work, maybe I need to mention this. Before I found work, I was in a church, in a community that actually didn't know what was happening around me. All they saw was a boy that lives in church, and nobody cared to know what was going on in my life. Nobody cared to know how they could improve my life, even if it's just by mentoring and teaching me the word, teaching me about just basic life skills. For someone who had lost parents at a very early age, all I could do was to see other people live their life and, of course, think that's how you do stuff. That's how you live your life. And I remember this guy, he came the other day just before I got this job, and I was sitting and he said to me, he called me and I went to him and he said, follow me. And we walked and we went to in the job exhibit, there was this shop called Discount Foods. And I don't know if it's still there because it's been quite a while. And he said, I want you to buy things that are important for you right now. And for someone who knows I have nothing in that church where I was sleeping, I didn't ask what my budget was. I picked up the very essential things that I cannot live without. That was what I did. There was no time for luxury. And now when I think that when we go to grocery stores now and you're by the till, you can just pick a chocolate and add to your grocery. That was luxury for me. It was luxury. And picked up essentials, toilet paper, bathing soap, sugar, salt, a bag of meal, tins of beef, of beans rather. Just things that I know these ones will sustain me for weeks or they will sustain me for a while. That's what I needed at the time. And I remember Christmas of the same year, this lady came to church. It's funny, it's the wife of the same guy. And church is done on Christmas Day. People are going to their houses, and I'm there. Of course, I lived in the church. I was the boy Samuel, and I was unshaved. My hair was going wild, and I looked unkempt. And the lady came to me and she says, "You know, you look much more handsome when you shave." I said, "Esh, my sister, it's rough." That's all I said. And then she went out to her car and she came back and she gave me 10 rands. She said, "Go and cut your hair," because she understood what I communicated by saying, "My sister, it's rough." And from that 10 rand, I was able to cut my hair, shave my beard, and still have change to buy myself food for the week from 10 rands. How God did it, I have no idea. But when I look back and I think about it, that's when I realized that it can only be God. It can only be God. And moral of the story is my life took a turn. I began to pray and I began to find jobs. After that construction job that I worked, the guy that I worked for 1 month decided he wasn't paying us. He ran away with our money. Now I was back to zero. I was stranded again. I couldn't even move out of the church yet because I still didn't have anywhere to go. But I can say God had blessed me at the time. I now had a few change of clothes. And now I had an extra pair of shoes that I could wear. And at least in the church, there was a bathroom where I could bath. And God made a way and I found another job. And I went to this job and we were working. It was not one of the fanciest jobs. And what I began to realize that after learning to pray, after learning to wait on God, after learning from this pastor, this guy from Zambia that taught me all these things, I began to see God's favor in my life. I began to see that I was beginning to get favor with man, because when I got this job, it was not a fancy job. It was in Johannesburg South, about probably 45 minutes away driving. But we would walk there. Took us 2 to 3 hours of walking, waking up very early in the morning. By the time you get there, you were sweaty and tired. And what we were doing is we're working in an estate and there was lakes in the estate. So we were maintaining the lakes to make sure that the weeds in the water are taken out, make sure that they are flowing nicely. So we would get there and we'd get in the lake and we would be weeding, pulling out all the things from the water. I still have marks on my back from the sunburns. I still have them to today. Because I remember we were peeling off skin off our back because of how much we were in the sun and how much the sun was burning us from the time. And even there, when the work was almost finished and retrenchment was on the cards and they were saying we need to reduce the number because now most of the work is done, I was the last person hired. I was hired in February. Other people were hired in January of that year, of 2010. And when the boss was now retrenching, he picked me first. He called me by name, Darlington, come. And I moved forward and he said, stand on my right. I stood on my right. And he said to the supervisor, whoever you decide that would stay, let them join him because he's staying. And I didn't understand it. Usually in companies, when there's retrenchment, it's last in, first out. That's what I've always known. That's what we know. That's what's common. But I was last in and they told me I was staying. And I began to appreciate the favor of God at the time. And there, the company was able to help me open my first ever bank account. I now had a bank account. Now I could walk into a bank. And I began to feel some sort of dignity. I began to feel that I can identify as a man amongst other men. I wasn't earning a lot of money. I was earning 2,000 rands. I'll mention figures. And back then in 2010, for me, that was an amount that I never seen before. So it meant that I could move out of the church, make room for someone else who can come, can stay there, who needs it. And I moved into a space where we were sharing with this other guy. So I was now out of the church premises, but I continued to serve in the church. I continued to be diligent. I continued to sweep, mop the floors. I remember even doing tiling on the floors of the church. I'd never done tiling in my life. Nobody had taught me. But the circumstance there required that I needed to do the tiling because people were going into the bathrooms that was now dangerous. So took it upon myself and I tiled the whole place with nobody teaching me. And then fast forward from there, another member of the church came and told me there was another place where they were hiring. And I said, I'll be interested in the opportunity. And I went and I got hired, and things just began to get better and better and better from there. And for me, why I decided to share this story from the very beginning of my career is that when everything looked like my roots were heading toward dead ends, God had placed someone there. This guy was there. He taught me to pray. He taught me to wait on the Lord. He taught me to hear the voice of God. He told me that even if somebody comes and offer you millions of rands, you can never throw away God in your life. At the time where I was staying at the shelter, I could have gone to drugs. I could have gone and done anything that I could have gone, and there were a lot of guys who were going to stand by the street corners, to stand by the traffic lights, to beg and all that. And for me, I knew that was not my story. They would come back with money and they say, it works. We're getting money, but I knew that was not the money I was supposed to get. I knew that was not where I was supposed to spend my days. And I realized that there's nothing so special about me. If God could take me out of that situation by using somebody, He used that pastor to give me that place. In fact, He used that guy who was a security to go and speak to the pastor that there is something different about this young man. And I was taken to that place, and the pastor said, I will accommodate you. I can't pay you because we are a small church, but I can give you where to sleep. He gave me security. He made me stay in a place, and I started realizing who I was. And this man coming and saying, I will teach you how to pray, was a man that God had placed in my path. And when I began to learn all these principles, I also started teaching and speaking to the people I was working with in all these areas to say, God, guys, there is much more than just these things that we see. And I began to speak God to them. If, in every place that I worked in those areas, they were calling me a man of God. They were calling me pastor. They were calling me names. But for me, it wasn't about all of that. It was that I was genuinely speaking from a place of, I've been here, I've been there, I know this. And I don't judge when I see someone standing on a traffic light and they're asking for 2 rands, because that was almost me. I almost went to the traffic light. And I decided that my life is worth much more than just standing and getting 2 rands. I need to find the purpose, the thing that which God has called me to. I haven't made millions. I don't live in the fanciest of places, but I know that my life is not the same as it used to be because some people decided to give time to me. Some people decided to extend a hand of mercy. They decided to give me another chance. But if all of these people saw me and they said, he's a homeless, he's a hobo, that's the word we use. He's a homeless, he's a hobo, and they pushed me away, I could have still been out there. I could have still been on the streets. I could have still been, or worse, I could have been killed because maybe I would have gone into crime, shot, or I could have been in prison. Anything could have happened. But God knew exactly what my end would be. And I'm glad that I'm still pushing and moving with God, and I still listen to Him. He still directs me, and He's still putting great people in my path. But for now, this is my story.